3 p.m. Please rise for the pledge. The flag is located behind us.
This is the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome all of you here this evening to the Borough Board's special meeting. The sole topic on the agenda is the Borough's proposed acquisition of the General Datacom properties. The format of the meeting, there are agendas here, if you haven't gotten one, will essentially to give you an overview of some of the history behind it, the negotiation process with General Datacom, the legal issues that are relative to that, and also the financial arrangements that are in the process of being made and will be made if the acquisition is approved. Normally at special meetings we do not allow public comment. However, given the large significant nature of this topic, we will have a public comment section after the presenters, and we will answer questions as will the team that's here to present to you. I just would like to start by introducing the team that will speak tonight. We have Jay Carlson. Jay is the chair of the Naugatuck Economic Development Corporation. The NEDC is the economic development arm of the Borough of Naugatuck and designated as the redevelopment authority for downtown. We have the attorney for the NEDC who has taken the lead on the borough's proposed acquisition of the property. That is Gary O'Connor, who's with the firm of Coleman & Conley. Borough Attorney Ned Fitzpatrick is handling the relationship between General Datacom and the borough as a potential tenant in the building, both prior to a proposed acquisition and after the transaction will be consummated. He is currently at the zoning meeting and will return, so we'll push his portion of the presentation down a bit. To discuss the financing, proposed financing, the Borough Controller Wayne McAllister is here. As is the borough's bond counsel, Marie Phelan, who is also from Coleman & Conley, and Richard Thurberge from William Blair and Company, LLC, who is the potential lender with this project. Many of you who are longtime residents know the General Datacom properties are essentially two parcels comprised of about 10 acres of land in downtown Naugatuck. I'm going to shift mics and walk over to a map here. You're free to come a little closer if it's a little too far away. The Datacom properties are essentially these two parcels. We are at the Naugatuck train station, which is here. The town hall is here, and the property known as Parcel C. We didn't get very creative when we named all our parcels are here. That is Borough home, as is the Naugatuck train station. The borough also owns the municipal parking lot that's located along Church Street, between Church Street and Old Firehouse Road. Properties we are discussing today are this large parking lot that borders Old Firehouse Road and the Metro North Rail line. That's known as Parcel B. The other parcel, which contains a building of about 400,000 square feet, is the General Datacom building, is known as Parcel A. So in its entirety, the property we're talking about is a little over 10 acres. And you're free to come up and look at that in your meeting. As many of you are aware, that property was included in a 60-acre development area for the project known as Renaissance Place. Renaissance Place was a transit-oriented smart growth project that encompassed over 60 acres in the central business district of Naugatuck. It was conceived in 2003 with the borough, the Naugatuck Economic Development Corporation, and Conray Development Company. There was a 5-year window during that development agreement that actual construction must begin. Due to many forces, and particularly an economic climate that changed dramatically, that project, for many reasons, in addition to the economy, did not come to fruition. Throughout that process, and then just to conclude that portion of it, the Borough, the NEDC, and Conway Development executed a release agreement in September, which essentially absolved all the parties of their rights, responsibilities, and obligations under the development agreement. What we're talking about is outside of that scope right now. But in the context of Renaissance Place, one of the major issues for us and for the developer was that essentially the borough only exercised site control over about 5 acres of that 60-plus acre development area. That included parcel C, which is about 2.5, this property, portion of which is leased by Metro North, which is a little over 2, and the small parking lot in between Church Street and Old Firehouse Road. The developer was unsuccessful in obtaining title to the other properties, and obviously the property we're talking about tonight, the 10 acres that is right along the river, right along Route 8, contains a significant building on it, was a central focus, and actually the original plan for Renaissance was where the development was to begin. Lack of site control and economic development is very a big obstacle in terms of your ability to have what you'd like to have happen, what's proposed to come to fruition. The borough was not ever intended during that process to obtain title. That was supposed to be the developer's responsibility, but it didn't happen. Economic forces have changed significantly since the original envision of Renaissance Place. I believe it was October or November, the borough was approached by a creditor of General Datacom. Apparently, there was a financial arrangement between General Datacom and another company that essentially financed a portion of their business. That arrangement was no longer working, and the developer at the time approached us to access Mr. Conroy in terms of working towards potential purchase of the General Datacom property. After a while, it became apparent that that was not going to happen, and the discussion switched to the borough being a potential purchaser of that property. At one point, that property was assessed at $5.6 million for one piece and about $772,000 for another piece. And essentially, with the new numbers that have come out from the revaluation that was just listed, the assessed value of the building and assessed value is 70% of market value. The assessed value of the building was about $4.7 million, and the new numbers with the appraised value being about $6.7. The land itself is valued or assessed at $413,000, and the appraised value is about $596,000. We can make those numbers available to you, or you can get them off of visionappraisal.com. The negotiations for this property, which have been quite private for some time and have been ongoing for many months, have concluded in the sales price for the purchase of that property totals at $2 million. Attorney O'Connor will explain to you the negotiation process, some of the legal issues. Clearly, that property was once an industrial property, which potentially subject to remediation costs. Attorney O'Connor will get into some of that, but essentially, you will ask the question, what does it cost to remediate that property? And the answer that you will receive is that that number varies significantly depending on what the use or reuse of that property will be. The traditional method of brownfield remediation was to remove amounts of soil and bring in an equal amount of soil that was clean to a site. One thing we learned about remediating parcel C, which did take us 3 times, was essentially that remediating today under modern standards is not something that you should necessarily do without a plan of reuse. There are ways under current brownfield remediation law to de-restrict certain portions of the property depending on what the ultimate use will be. So at this point, we have environmental assessment information on that property. General Datacom allowed us to, through a site access agreement, perform that testing, and we have done so through a grant from the federal EPA Brownfields program to get data on that property. The collective thought behind this is our future. The urban core of our town is in this location. We own property across the street, and we own this property. But what happens to downtown Naugatuck will in large part, not just tomorrow, but for years in the future, be determined by what is redeveloped on that site. When you don't own a property, and this is one of the questions that I get most often from people who are wondering, what can we do for economic development? The common question is, why can't business X come to Naugatuck? There's lots of answers to that. Some have to do in the retail segment for demographic information, traffic counts, population, densities, and socioeconomic factors. But the reality is if you don't own it, you don't control it. And at some point, the potential exists for that property developing with little control by the borough, but for our zoning laws. The alternative of that is that that property sits there as it has since I've been a child, without redevelopment on it. And we go through another cycle, another generation of lack of any downtown redevelopment. This initiative that we are putting forth, this proposal, it's well thought out. It's taken many months to put together, but it is bold. It means that we as a community are deciding we want to control our destiny in a large portion of our central business district that's located along Route 8, along the Naugatuck River, has an active rail line in it, and is at the very core of the central business district. So that is the context in which we come to you as a board this evening. The Naugatuck Economic Development Corporation has approved the acquisition of this property by its board. That has no legal significance whatsoever, but the creation of that entity was to take economic development outside the realm of the political arena and put it in the hands of a bipartisan public-private partnership that seeks to do what's right for Naugatuck in the long term. And I think they have been very successful in keeping that spirit. Members of this board have been members of that board at various times. Some still are. But essentially, we come forward to you tonight in a very open manner to explain what the proposal is and where we need to move forward. One thing that I did not mention to touch on, and Gary will get into this a little further. You may have heard that the borough passed a resolution a couple of months ago to authorize the taking of the property, the acquisition to include the taking by eminent domain, which essentially means under law we would be taking the property and compensating the owner for it. We have no and have never had the intention of doing that. However, there is a unique exclusion in the Connecticut Brownfield statutes that allows the borough to take title to a property and be exempt from what's called the Transfer Act, which is something that triggers certain requirements for owners to clean property. The threat of eminent domain excludes the borough from the taking, or excludes the borough from the Transfer Act, even if we do not intend to use it. And as I said, Gary will touch on that a little bit further. I've talked a lot, and I don't want this to go on too much longer in terms of not having the community talk on it. So with that, I will introduce my good friend and the chair of the Naugatuck Economic Development Corporation, Jay Carlson, to just explain a little bit of the history, because he's been involved in this since the very beginning. Thanks, Jay.
Well, now that the mayor has talked about, now that the mayor, can you guys hear me all right? I need the microphone. Now that the mayor has talked about everything I'm going to talk about, I get to talk. Sorry. No, it's quite all right. Actually, just to remind everybody a little bit, back in the late 90s, under Mayor Taft's guidance, and at the time, Bob Mezzo was a Burgess, and Chris Gerber, I believe, was also a Burgess. The thought of what did we need to do as a town to further economic development, because it had been so disjointed for so many years for a whole variety of reasons. It's like, what are we going to do? And the Mount Auburn study was born, and out of the Mount Auburn study, the Naugatuck Economic Development Corporation was formed. And as Bob just said, it's a bipartisan, by design. It has members of the community, it has business members, it has members of the Board of Mayor Burgesses, as well as all the other boards of town finance, Board of Education, and whatnot. That's all done so that we can continue to move forward the economic development initiatives of this town. And we've gone through now 4 or 5 administrations from both sides, Republicans and Democrats alike. And one of the things about Naugatuck that I love is that it really doesn't matter what party you're from, because we really do a great job of being nonpartisan here. I wish that the, no, that's not me. That's not me. I wish that the nation would be able to work the way that the people in Norfolk work, because we do what's right for the townsfolk, and we do what's right for the population as a whole. All that being said, the Economic Development Corporation has been very successful in the industrial part. It's been very successful in bringing in other jobs and other businesses throughout the community. And 6 or so years ago, we entered into an agreement with Alex Conroy as the preferred developer for downtown Naugatuck. Alex had a vision for this town that we all eagerly joined into, because it's exactly what I think all of us still want to see this downtown look like. 2008 happened, and 2008 changed the entire nation. It didn't just change Naugatuck, it changed the state, it changed the nation, and the ability to finance the types of operations that Alex had envisioned literally disappeared. One of the things that Alex needed to do in order for Renaissance Place to succeed was to obtain the General Datacom property. And I know for a fact that he offered 6 times or more what we're going to potentially pay for that property in order to obtain control of that property. That's how important it was to his vision of this 60-acre parcel that we have for downtown Naugatuck. They rejected that offer at the time. One of the reasons, and there are many reasons why Alex couldn't come through, but one of the reasons that things failed is because he couldn't gain control of that property. Gaining control of that property gains our town's ability to control our destiny. So as we look at this and as we talk about it, and as we talk about how we're going to potentially make this happen, you need to think about the cost that we're talking about as compared to the control of our destiny. Because, I remember, I was in high school in 1975, 1976, when Uniroyal closed down. And Uniroyal closed its doors, and everybody left, and we didn't do anything for a long, long time. They tore the buildings down, and we still, as a community, didn't do anything for too long of a period of time. We now have all the pieces of the puzzle in place. We have a board of mayor and burgesses that works well together. We've got a lot of nonpartisan politics in town. We don't have any partisan politics in town, quite frankly, at this point. We have an Economic Development Corporation that is functional and made up of all of the pieces of the community that need to be there, and we're moving forward and we're moving in the right direction. This is an opportunity for all of us to control our destiny so that we don't have another generation, so that my children and Bob's very little children don't have to look at a big empty hole downtown when we can actually control it and fix it and revitalize and, quite frankly, rebuild our tax base, because it needs to happen. We need more industry in this town. We don't have the room for more industry. We don't have enough industrialized property for our industry or for our town to build the grandest. We need to build it somehow. This is the way to do it. So with that, I'll pass it on to whomever else is on the list, and I'll be able to questions later.
Thank you, Jay. Now, speaking about the legal negotiations, some of the brownfields issues, Attorney Gary O'Connor from Pullman and Comley, who represents the NEDC and has taken the lead on this portion, will speak with you. I will reference that Attorney O'Connor is one of the foremost leaders in brownfields law in the state of Connecticut, and we've been very fortunate to have his expertise throughout this process. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you, Mayor. I have to say there, you did a pretty good job of explaining the legal issues and some of the environmental issues, so you're going to make this easy for me. Just to give you some background, I was engaged, first of all, to help with Borough in the negotiations with Alex Conroy, and then help negotiate the party of ways. And that actually, with the help of the Board of Burgesses, the NEDC, that was going to The second part of my engagement was to help with the acquisition of the GDC properties. And obviously these properties are old industrial sites. They are products of our proud industrial legacy. And like a lot of properties up and down the valley across the state of Connecticut, there are environmental issues associated with them. And what I spend most of my practice on is helping municipalities, helping economic development agencies and businesses and developers in purchasing these brownfield sites and helping them to manage the risk. And that's what we're talking about here. I mean, these two properties have environmental issues. The good news is that they've been fully investigated. There's a series of different types of investigations. One's phase 1, site assessment, phase 2. Phase 3 is the most extensive. All 3 phases have been done on this property. So we know what we're dealing with. And, there are a few hot spots of items that over the next few years we'll probably remove. There's a couple of small hot spots of some PCBs and they're near where the old powerhouse was and where there was some ash dumping. But, nothing that's real critical, nothing that can't be handled. I mean, the most extensive and costly part of the remediation here is not necessarily the types of contamination. It's just that it's pervasive throughout. It's ETPH and ash and wood fill and things that may exceed state standards right now are not necessarily terrible, but there is a cost associated with remediating it. Over the years we've gotten more sophisticated in how we deal with these sites. Years ago, and I think that I'm sure that this municipality has dealt with it that way, is everything was just extracted. That cost was enormous. Nowadays, there are a lot of new tools. I've been the chair of the Brownfield Task Force of the state, and over the last 6 years, we've tried to create additional tools. So you can, especially in industrial areas, you can cap the site, and as long as there's not any huge pools with the property, it's sufficient just to cap it. You can isolate soils under the buildings. So when the mayor said, really the true cost of remediation is not really known until there is a development plan, that's correct, because a lot of what was formerly extracted can now be isolated under the building pads or capped with particle glass and things of that nature. So as the years go on, there's more tools, the science gets better, and the cost of remediation becomes less challenging. So the goal here is to make sure in the short term we knew exactly what we were dealing with and manage the risk. Whenever you're dealing with a property, there is risk, but it's manageable. And to make sure that we weren't under the gun to start doing something right away. The mayor alluded to the Transfer Act, and that's in the state of Connecticut, that's the big powerful weapon for okay, that's good. At least somebody knows.
Kenny, it's the sound that we're filming this.
You said the sound is all right.
Okay, yeah. The Transfer Act is the state's cleanup act. And basically what it says, if you're considered an establishment, and there's a number of criteria to why you would be an establishment, then when the property is sold, either the buyer or the seller has to agree to fully investigate and remediate the site according to state standards. And there's, 2 years you have to start the investigation. many times the price we were paying for the property when I was condo and I was still the first developer of this area. And they turned it down. They probably regret it now, but they turned it down. And so,
He just wants to get on camera.
so, you know, we've been in negotiations for some time now, and you know, and anyone who's experienced dealing with the proposed GDC, they're certainly not pushovers, and they're very sophisticated business people, and they know how to work. So, and with the help of the city and with the board, we were, you know, we've been going through this. Everything has been very open and transparent with both boards, and we had to find that number that would move them. And fortunately, they also have a lender who was really motivated to get something out of the property, pay down the loan, and move on. And you know, they didn't want to have to. The lender didn't want to have to go through the whole trouble of potentially foreclosing on the property. So that lender was very helpful in getting us, getting the parties to meet on a purchase price. The board months ago, you know, instructed the mayor and agreed that the purchase price of $2 million would be appropriate. And so for the last month and a half, we've been negotiating the contract. And it's, you know, even though the site and the environmental issues and the management issues, those are complex, you know, the agreement is actually is not so. You know, it's a pretty straightforward deal. We're not giving them a cent until we close the $2 million. They have to provide us with marketable title, which is the best title we can have. You know, you know, there's certain performance requirements that they have. We're accepting the property as is, and that is a condition that all municipalities, you know, when requiring these types of properties have. The one thing we aren't doing, which is a little bit unusual, is although we're taking the property as is, and you know, we are releasing GDC for any claim one we might have for whatever cleanup we have. We are not identifying that. And normally the seller would want to identify when they sell the property, where there's still a deviation that has to be done. But we felt that we had some additional leverage and didn't have to offer that. You know, the one other, I guess, unique thing here is that GDC or a subsidiary, actually, the property is owned by GDC Nonprofit. But one of the affiliates or subsidiaries is occupying the building now. They're going to move down to basically one floor. We'll have a little space on the second floor, but what I wanted to make sure is that they're negotiating a lease right now with Attorney Fitzpatrick. I did not want to be in a position that we sign a contract to purchase this and the lease, which will be complicated, was not signed at closing. So what I added is simple use and occupancy agreement, which basically says if we don't have a lease signed by closing, you have to comply with certain requirements. You have to insure the property. You have to pay us a use and occupancy fee for the 60 days that we're going to allow you to stay there after the closing. And that's $31,332. And two installments. One at the time of closing, $15,666, and the second installment 30 days later. We've also put in there that if a lease is not executed within that 60-day period, then the town has the right to give them notice to get out, and we have to get out within 3 months.
Thank you. Attorney O'Connor will be available for questions at the public comment portion as well. Attorney Fitzpatrick is here. He is the borough attorney, and he has taken the lead on the post-closing relationship between the borough and General Datacom, which would essentially involve a lease agreement. General Datacom wants to be in that space. There's obviously details in terms and conditions that need to be ironed out, stated by Attorney O'Connor. There's a use and occupancy provision for 60 days post-closing, but I'm going to introduce Attorney Fitzpatrick to talk about the long-term plans for an arrangement with Datacom. And also, he has walked the building with Deputy Mayor Rossi and some other individuals to determine the condition of the building, which is obviously old and been unoccupied on a couple of floors for many years. So, is that Attorney Fitzpatrick?
Meeting, Mayor, board, the public, I am Borough Attorney, Nick Fitzpatrick for your record. As Mayor indicated, we've been looking at several aspects of the transaction, proposed transaction. One is a long-term lease, and the other is, along with Attorney O'Connor, we've looked at, discussed the contractual. It should be noted that in the contract, there is the use and occupancy provision that Attorney O'Connor discussed was based on a per square foot number that arrived at through discussions with our Department of Economic Development coordinator, who had acquired that knowledge of that through his experience in the marketplace and through discussions with real estate, commercial real estate brokers. So the hope in terms of executing a lease is that we, as a borough, it seems that the borough, the sense of the board is that we would like to keep General Datacom as a tenant. They have indicated to us they wish to remain. Of course, as you've heard often, it's in the details that really counts. So we're looking at discussing the terms, the range and scope of those terms, deal with the size of the occupancy, which looks like, as Attorney O'Connor mentioned, will be mostly the first floor, maybe a portion of the second floor. That would be the size of the premises. We're looking at a proration of the expenses for the building to be picked up by Datacom. An outline of those issues, that coverage is in the contract for sale. It is probably, let's just say, we're hopeful we can have a lease done by the time we close, but we're fully cognizant of the possibility that will not occur. So we at least have a number established, which would be part of the record and also admissible in the event there is a contest down the road regarding the appropriate value of the premises and for a lease on a lease basis. We're hopeful that we can work something out with them, and we're moving in that direction. With regard and the details of the lease, when we're there, will be provided to the board. With regard to the premises themselves, I have been through the building with the company of the building official, the fire marshal, Bruce Rossi, the fire chief, several members of his department. The purpose of the review, or that review of the building, physical review, was to evaluate what it is that exists in the property. There are three major components that we're looking at. One is, what is the functionality of the building as it exists? What would it take to make it, for example, watertight? What are the conditions of the systems contained within the building? HVAC, plumbing, water systems. And there's also fire safety code issues that we're looking at. At this point, we have, in terms of numbers, we have evaluation of the roof. The roof does need to be replaced. And that's what it's not something that, in the opinion of the roofing contractor, looked at it and indicated that he didn't think it was capable of being repaired. We're not exactly sure yet. We hope in the next couple of weeks we'll receive another view of that. But I have been up there. I've also witnessed, I've seen what he saw, and I've also reviewed the photographs he took, and his indication to us that the roof is in need of replacement, not repair. There are a waiting report from the systems evaluation company that was Siemens, who has been, as my understanding, has done significant work on the school system facilities, and as well as, by the way, the roofing contractor was also someone who's done work in the borough for kind of filed, by the way, they did the contractor. Certainly, if any work was done, it would be something that would be sent out and put out the bid, of course, with borough charter, but it is important, and it was recognized by everyone on this board, very much so, that we really need to look at what we're getting in terms of a physical facility. And the physical facility is pretty remarkable. It is a 320,000 square foot plus building with very thick concrete walls. I don't believe we have a per square foot stress test on each point, but there are some marks on the facility itself. We just don't know if those are current, but at some point, we should have a structural engineer. We plan to have a structural engineer look at it just to let us know what the numbers are, exactly what it could withstand. But there are four floors. There's a basement area. The other aspect of this is we looked at there are some elevators also in the building, two of which were not occupied, two of which were not operating. There's also a freight style elevator that is closed off, that we think operates, but does not meet the current code requirements. So there's aspects of the building, and it is large. If you think about the 80+ thousand square feet, you're looking at about a 2-acre structure. So you're looking out over, you can't really almost see from one end to the other. That's how large it is. It is incredible. So, but it's something that as this part of the analysis goes, the purpose of this was, since the borough would likely be purchasing the property as is, we want to know what as is. And so that's the goal. We're not quite here yet. We're getting there. In the meantime, we will be utilizing the outlines of the transaction as I've discussed with Mr. Henry from GDC, and as articulated and outlined in the purchase agreement, and in terms of our overall potential lease agreement. And of course, we're aware that, and you're aware too, that there are several tenants on premises. One is inside the building, and one is outside. Those are separate issues, but they're contemplated in the purchase agreement, and those are short-term, relatively very short-term terms. So those the borough will have much flexibility on what it desires to do on that basis in the event the purchase is canceled. So I don't know if we're at this time. We'll have more information as we go forward.
Thank you. With that, one of the big questions is how will the borough pay for the proposed acquisition? And with that, I'll turn it over to the borough controller, Wayne McAllister, and his team, which includes our bond counsel and the representative from the financing entity. Wayne?
My assignment was to find the funds for the acquisition of this property. Our first look was internal. We looked at the town's fund balance. Our fund balance, for those of you who are unfamiliar with governmental accounting, is basically the difference between assets and liabilities over time, the accumulation of funds. According to separate funds, the general fund is the operating fund of the municipal government. Other funds can be established for specific purposes, such as construction projects that span several fiscal years. The high school renovation project alone is an example of a special fund. Fund balance is a term accountants use to describe the arithmetic difference between the assets and liabilities reported in the general fund. Now, over the last 5 to 10 years, the Finance Board has made a concerted effort of building fund balance, unassigned fund balance for the town. That conservative approach has proven to be beneficial in terms of bond ratings. We recently received an upgrade to our fund balance based on a conservative budgeting. Standard & Poor's rating services rated its rating for the Borough of North Connecticut external obligation bonds to AA- and A+. The upgrade reflects our opinion of the Borough's stable general fund reserves and good management policies and practices. Further state that we believe the borough's finances are stable. Despite the recession, unreserved general fund balances have been approximately 9% of expenditures in each of the past 4 audited fiscal years. The borough closed fiscal 2009 with a $487,000 general fund surplus and a $9.8 million unreserved general fund balance, 9.4% of expenditures, which we consider strong. Moody's Investor Services mirrors the same statement. In Fitch's ratings, states that the solid financial flexibility management, the borough's finances are well managed with conservative budgeting and sound unreserved fund balance. The borough's economic indicators are mixed, above average unemployment and mixed wealth and income levels. The borough's debt levels are moderate. Pensions are fully funded. The borough has begun making contributions to its other post-employment benefits trust. I mention this to you because I've chosen not to recommend that we use our general fund unassigned funds to purchase this property. The concern is that we have the high school project coming online. Take $2 million of this, bring our rating, potential rating in jeopardy, because our threshold will be below the 10% floor that we've struggled to achieve over time. If we were to suffer a downgrade in ratings, that would cost us dollars, specific dollars for the high school project. The project will be borrowing anticipation notes, bond anticipation notes for the interim construction period. Final bonding will be probably 3 to 4 years out. But any blip in the bond rating, a small blip is 15 basis points, and this project of this size, it costs us about $600,000 over the life of the bond for the high school. And the rating that would indicate that we've gone into fund balance, dipped below the threshold, and had a negative outlook on our financial structure, could cost us up to $2 million in additional interest costs for the high school project. It chose not to pursue that. So given that, had a discussion with the bond council and with the folks at William Blair in terms of how to structure this acquisition. And we came up with the idea of a municipal lease purchase. And Marie Fail and bond council will talk about the wherewithal of using that kind of vehicle to purchase this. Marie?
A municipal lease purchase agreement is kind of like a installment sale agreement. It's the kind of vehicle that's used for in short-term borrowing. You pay the principal and interest payments, you retain title to the property. So the purchaser of the lease, it's usually a private leasing company. And they will take generally as security either the asset that you're purchasing or in this case, because of the environmental issues that were discovered. We expect that a purchaser of the lease will probably want an assignment of the rents that the borough will be receiving when it leases the property. A lease purchase is not considered debt, so the borough will have to do annual appropriations every year to make payments in the lease.
Speak a little louder and more
Okay. What I just said was a lease purchase agreement is subject to annual appropriation. The payments under a lease purchase agreement is subject to annual appropriation. It's not considered debt. So every year it's an expense, a budgetary expense, and the borough would have to appropriate money for the payments under the lease.
Yeah, so I just could clarify, because the term lease payment is confusing to the average taxpayer in terms of them connecting it with a lease rather than it being a financing mechanism.
It's generally like an installment sale where you're making principal and interest payments every year. It's structured legally as a capital lease under federal law. Federal tax law is called a capital lease. Once the payments are made after 5 years or 7 years or 10 years, however long the lease is outstanding, you purchase, you get the asset becomes yours for $1. Or
Sounds to me that this leasing company is almost acting as a bank. They're providing us the funds to purchase the $2 million to purchase the property, right? And then we're paying them back on an annual basis, interest plus principal over some life is of that. I guess my question was, what is going to be the life of this? The second question, though, my third question is, what is the interest costs of that type of financing versus we're bonding or something else? What's the difference in cost between the rate we could get, say, from school versus the rate we're going to get under this lease purchasing structure?
I like your question because that's a financial question, and we have William Blair sitting here, so I'll hand Dick the microphone.
That was quick, thanks. Basically, if you issued a lease purchase, as we're talking about, you're going to pay a higher interest rate, but you have more flexibility in terms of being able to cancel. If we did a traditional taxable bond issue, you'd have a lower interest rate, but you lose the flexibility. Also, a lease purchase, because it's subject to annual appropriation, is something that does not require, and Marie can go to this, I'll hand the mic back to you quickly, but, is subject to annual appropriation, so it doesn't have to go through the normal process that you would for a bond issue.
I understand that. Now, the numbers.
I thought you'd get to that, Ross. I remember working with you many years ago, yes.
Kind of like the information, so I guess I would look to first say to Wayne, if we were to go out with the same funding for bonding, what would be the interest rate versus what you would expect the interest rate to be under this lease purchase?
Yeah, in general, I'm going to handle Wayne, or?
Yes, typically, at this point in time, is we went out today, to be under 100 basis points differential between a taxable bond versus a lease purchase vehicle.
Okay, just because I don't understand basic, take that into a percentage difference.
100
Yeah.
basis points is a 1%.
Right.
So it's a 2% increase in terms of the rate between what we would get if we bonded versus this structure. Like it's a,
No, less than 100 basis points,
Yeah.
1%.
Yeah.
that's
To give you some parameters, because I know that's where you're going with it, you know, the lease purchase is going to be somewhere over 4% in terms of low fours. A bond issue is going to be low threes. You know, in a nutshell, even if the lease sounds like a higher rate, and it is, but to put it in perspective, I don't think the borough has sold too many bonds on a tax-exempt basis that would be anywhere near that. The charts that you have, just because I don't want Wayne to waste it on this paper, this kind of illustrates where we are with interest rates. And I apologize, you know, gray lines and black lines, but if you look at the solid black line that's Fed funds, that kind of tells you where the federal government's policy has been. And under Chairman Bernanke, you can see that rates have been very, very low since the financial crisis. That's that bottom solid line. The line, if you look at and try to follow the 10-year Treasury and follow that down, that's now below the BBI 20. The BBI 20 is an index we use for tax-exempt bonds. Normally, you would expect to have a higher interest rate on a taxable bond than a tax-exempt. But because of the Fed policy and the flight to quality, we now find that taxable rates are actually at a lower rate. So I've been in this business 38 years, and I always say that I have sold many bonds, more bonds, over 7% than under 7% on a tax-exempt basis, and that doesn't necessarily mean I'm a bad bond salesman.
So following up my train of thought, what would be, we're talking about borrowing $2 million. What is the length of time to pay back for that $2 million?
But we're in the process.
10 years, what's our looking to borrow for?
We've been in the process of talking to a couple of lenders and banks that do this type of financing. And the range, and we've been talking with Wayne, and the range is anywhere from 5 to 10 years. Been looking at that would be the same with a bond in the 5 to 10 year range.
So for any purposes, we don't need to know that number for budgeting. So we're going to put in for an annual payment of that. Now, follow up on the question that was asked earlier, in terms of the rate brought up. In some cases, these purchase agreements, they use the land or what we purchased. In this case, because of other issues regarding that land, she said they use something else. But I think I heard the value of the lease between GDC and the town. What is the guarantee of not using the land? What are you using to guarantee?
The guarantee would be twofold. First of all, it would be a promise that you would appropriate the money to pay the lease. So you would make a representation that you'll do your best efforts to make that appropriation. And the people in the market that know the borough of Naugatuck would think very highly of that promise. So there'll be a promise to pay or to make the appropriation. The other security would be an assignment of the income that you would get from leasing out that property. And that would be it.
I think expected we're going to know the term, the
the fees involved? You said that the rate's a little higher when we go with it. What are the fees?
The acquisition cost is essentially the same as it would be for bond and just for lease.
It's the same.
I know we've had a couple questions in the context of the financial presentation. Is there anything more you would like to state in terms of a presentation, or can we begin the public comment question period? All right. What we're going to do is allow people to come. We're going to turn the podium around, so if you can give us a minute just to exchange. We have 3 microphones, so if you can be patient with the dissemination of them for the various people who have to answer questions. We invite you to come forward, simply state your name and your address for our records, and this will be a very informal question and answer public comment section where we can interact with you for various questions or statements that you might have. So as soon as that podium is up and ready, we welcome your comments and questions. Okay, public comment is open. Questions, comments, dialogue, interaction.
I can't disagree with that. The solution really is
to go, and this is best for this town. Well, take the 1% off the lending agreement and go to the board people and have a vote. It seems like it's cheaper, and you know you got more support. Either people want it or they don't. But the bottom line is, I mean, this is a big decision for the whole town.
Yeah, Glenn, I think you raised some good points, but the reality of what you're saying about a purchase price is the price varies depending on who owns it and what that person wants to do with it. There is an appraisal that was done, and it was an appraisal that was extremely difficult to find comparisons for between that property and anything else in our region. Clearly, it has a value, or the entire board of the NEDC, the Board of Mayor and Burgesses, and we've had consultation with our finance board, wouldn't have allowed it to get to this step. The price was negotiated, which fair market value in this country is essentially determined by what people are willing to pay for it. The fair market value for a private party to redevelop that is going to be very affected by whether or not that party is required to adhere to the Transfer Act. The borough was allowed to purchase that property as an exemption from the Transfer Act. The appraisal that we had done was, I won't say inconclusive, because as I said, it was hard to determine the property, but the ranges were very diverse based on whether or not the Transfer Act applied, or whether you were going to clean that parcel in the fullest extent, which essentially is removing every bit of contaminated soil, digging down, I think it's 4 feet standard, and replacing. So the price ranged from about $3.5 million to negative, I don't know, it was $12–15 million, depending on where you want to go. When you say what the cleanup costs are, you can't determine what the cleanup costs are unless you have a development proposal right now that tells me what you're going to do, where you're going to locate it, and how much federal or state funding you're going to need to do that. The cost depended on the use, and that was the problem with the parcel C remediation, which no fault of anyone at the time, that's the way remediation was done. It began back in the 90s when we first started to clean that property, and that was the traditional way of remediating. With the changes in law, with the ability to deed restrict now, you can be very efficient with regard to what the cleanup costs you're going to incur. You know, to say that the property is worth nothing to the borough, or worth $1, or has negative value, it's just not true. Because, as I said, it is the central core of our community. It's what we will be. Now, I've been looking, I don't know when you moved to Nottingham, but I've been looking at that property in its current state for the better part of my lifetime, probably over 30 years, in terms of it looking like it does now. And I don't want to wake up in 20 years and look out and see it's still looking like that. The market forces that are driving the private sector, given the potential applicability of the Transfer Act, are going to be there's going to be very little incentive for the private sector to come in and purchase that property without some arrangement with the public sector that there's an agreement to clean it. And that's driving where we've all come. This isn't a decision that we woke up with, yesterday. It's a product of not only the 5 years of the experience through the development agreement of Renaissance Place, but essentially close to 13, 14 months of deliberations, of discussions with council, and looking at the various pros and cons of doing this. Is there risk? Absolutely. There's risk any time you try to be bold and look forward to your future. But I think the risk of doing nothing far outweighs the cost of this transaction.
You've articulated very well, reasons for going forward with the purchase, and I understand and I applaud the effort that, you've undertaken in order to get us to where we are tonight. The question I have is, that you didn't address, is if it's that important, and if you believe in it so strongly, why not do the cheaper route, bond fund it, and bring it before the people?
I think there's 2 reasons for that. One is a matter of timing. because this process has gone for a very long time in discussions with the owner and the person who holds the first priority interest on the property. The other is the flexibility of fixing the bond for a term when our long-term plans for this property are not to own it for the entire term of of the length of the financing instrument. Ultimately, we will seek redevelopment of downtown Naugatuck. We hope, and that can take various forms. It can take different styles in terms of, whether we sell the entirety of the two parcels, whether we split the parcels. But ultimately, our goal is to turn the property around and have private development on it. That private development is going to require the Borough of Naugatuck, the State of Connecticut, and the United States EPA, and or other agencies to assist with it. So the timing is important of it. The flexibility, as Attorney Phelan referenced, with regard to the lease payment over the bond, and there's also a philosophical difference that you and I may have. I think we elect people to make the decisions in this country. I think we do that at the federal level, the state level, and the local level. This board collectively has worked on this. It's made up of people from different walks of life, different political parties, different ideologies, and they put forward a proposal that says, we believe this is right for the Borough of Naugatuck. It's not frivolous, it's not ignoring the cost or the risks that are involved, but the elected leadership of this community is stating, and through the allowance by state law in terms of how we finance transactions, is saying, this is important for us. If we can organize referendums on every big decision we make and not have to spend months doing it, I think that the mayors that sit on this board will look back to the Renaissance Place proposal and say, there was a lot of time that went by between that concept and that vote. Renaissance Place came to us in 2003. We voted in 2007. The economy was very different at that time, and certainly a year later it was much different. There's bold action on the table here, and I think that requires the elected leaders, the people who've been entrusted with the authority to make those decisions, to speak with a voice. And ultimately, that may be philosophically different from where you're coming from. I totally respect that. But that's my reason for saying we have thought this through, we've done our due diligence, we want to make a decision to move the community forward.
I respect your opinion, but the reality is we're going to pay more money in interest on a financing mechanism that was just created to avoid a vote. I mean, if I know anything about the way the way this environmental cleanup and everything works, is we can bond for 5 years because there's no way that ownership between the borough and a third party is going to transfer within 5 years when it means we're getting federal funding, getting all these approvals that have to happen. It's not an easy process, and it's not going to be an overnight process. So, the flexibility argument, I don't believe that's a credible argument. The argument or the reason I think it's being done is just a simple way to avoid the vote. Now, I guess we're going to have a philosophical difference on it, but I think it's a shame to pay more in order to keep a vote out, avoid a vote. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense to me.
But you're making an assumption that, first of all, you're making an assumption about the length of time it would take to redevelop the property. You're making a broad assumption that the purpose of financing in this method is simply meant to avoid taking a public vote or having a bond. And this is not a new financing arrangement that the Borough of Naugatuck is using. We've actually used it before. Other communities have used it. The law allows us to, and has recognized that there are ways to do it. I'll let the financial team, which I trust, quite frankly, and I've had a lot of experience dealing with our controller, with our bond counsel. They've guided us through a lot of big decisions that we made as a community. And I think some of the assumptions that you're making are just not accurate. I don't know if you'd like to touch with regard to the term and the flexibility or the financing associated with it.
At least you would be able to pay off at any time. That would be different from the
Bond is a fixed term instrument, yeah. And then you're paying the interest on the bond regardless of whether we pay it early or not. I'm assuming we can't repay bonds early as.
These are taxable bonds, so
anything.
Born James, instead of borrowing the money, there is probably another way to do it by raising taxes to $1 million on people by enacting the pay tax payment.
I mean, it's certainly an option. I don't know if the rest of the colleagues have an opinion on it.
The same thing, because you're going to take the money after the interest out of our funds.
Right.
So instead of paying interest, I can give you the money up front, and you give it to me back.
That's not usually a luxury that we have, because we have other debt service that we have to repay, and our interest rates are affected, and I think to Controller McAllister's point about the amount of money that we have in our fund balance, the level of taxation certainly is a way of getting there, but we don't necessarily do that on the other large purchases that we make. Would we like to be in a position to have the capital resources to make them without financing? Yes, but Nogtuck's not alone, and when you're making a significant investment of that nature, that you finance it.
But $2 million, it's not 150 or $2 million out of 3,000 residents. It's probably $100 in some their household, some places in mind. I mean, I'm willing to pay if this is a good deal. And you can give me the money back. We'll got it. Instead of borrowing the money and paying interest, why don't you pay interest to those financial companies?
Think about it in terms of your house. I mean, you're right. It would be really nice to be able to buy your house and pay cash and pay, but most people can't do that. Now, the town has a whole host of obligations in what we call long-term capital purchases, which are big items, generally more than a couple of $100,000. Those kind of things, they spread out over the life, a longer life, and all taxpayers share over a longer term to pay for that. For example, if you were to buy a new school and pay cash, say all those other taxpayers today would pay cash for that school, right? Well, people would use that school for the next 30 years. So why should all people today pay for that school today when they're not going to use it? It spreads out big purchases over a longer period of time and more people pay for that, sharing the cost of that. Hopefully that will simplify it. That's the concept.
I got here a little late, and I hear you were talking about buying this piece of property, or somehow financing this piece of property. Are you going to do that without going to the referendum, without asking people? It's a heck of a big piece of property to do that. You're really circumnavigating your financial responsibility by doing that. Let me tell you, I've been in business my life in this town for 40 years, and I never heard anything this magnitude, especially when you're coming right off of a failure of a developer who's supposed to be a creme developer, and you're going to go around with the taxpayer who's ultimately going to pay it with or without interest. I mean, this guy's can't be going to do it. You know, tax me for it right up front. At least be honest with him. But you're going around behind him to do this deal. On a very speculative piece of property, I may add. You're expanding your bridge here now into this little bottleneck, and you're not putting on roads. So where's your foresight on that? You know, and then what's going to happen to all the merchants that are up on Rubber Avenue who are getting beaten down by the economic laws because commerce isn't down here. Commerce is in New Haven Road. And then when you drive down New Haven Road, you take a look in the old Peter Paul company there. Look at the crater they're doing that with that pollution reabatement they're doing there. And that was just what? Sugar? This property, you know, like I say, I was born and raised in this town. This property is seriously done. I just had a basement done in my kitchen, and it cost me $6,000, and I had little tiles. But I just wanted my house to be the piece I was working on. All right. This thing's, how much did we spend across the street here? At least $4 million. and it's still probably not up to snuff. Those regulations are getting tougher and tougher all the time, and you can't make commerce come down here. You can't make it. And if you do this property and spend this kind of money by going around the taxpayer, then what are you going to do for rubber ag? There's commerce there. And there's a lot of need out there. A lot of need. So, I don't like this idea the least little bit. And I'll bet you if you went to referendum, and each one of you are the leaders of our town, and I know you've got the right interest in our town, but you're scratching the wrong. It's a horrible investment. It's not a bad investment. It's a horrible investment.
If they know that they want to go around to clean up the area, should make it more attractive. For a business may come over here.
We gotta have one at a time, and we're really, I know this is very loose, but we usually want you to say your name.
Its taxes, Bob?
Excuse me?
Is this property current?
On the real property taxes, they are current. There is an arrearage in the personal property, which is significantly less. They are on a payment plan, which includes the interest to repay that. A lot of the comments that you stated, we have addressed. It's not a skirt around the taxpayers. This is a special meeting. We're allowing very open dialogue here. At this point in the process, in many cases, we're still in executive session. You've got a purchase and sales agreement on the desk there. So this is not an attempt to skirt law. This is an attempt to make a decision of where we like our...
Skirt the law. You're skirting the residents of this town, not just the taxpayers, the residents of the town. Because everybody's going to be affected by this project. This is not a... we're not putting together two little bricks.
Well, I guess, and I don't want to turn it into too lengthy of a conversation. What's your proposal for downtown? When you look at...
Let the law of economics settle themselves. If the property prices are right, commerce will go there, will stay there as long as it can make money, and then it will leave. Let fair market.
What is the fair market?
Fair market.
I don't believe Mr. Herb understands how much we're paying for the property. Do you know how much we're paying? We're proposing to pay for the property.
I've speculated about 2 weeks. One of the Burgesses asked me a couple of months ago, and I said, I wouldn't buy it for nothing, but I said, you'll probably get around $3 million.
Guess what? We're proposing to pay less than that.
How much what?
So we're paying,
Two.
we're proposing to pay $2 million for the property.
But $4 million over here for abatement, and there was much more over there. Everybody in this town that grew up in this town knows that the pollution on that side of the Maple Street is horrendous. To touch that building, like I say, I just did the kitchen, the little kitchen floor. It cost me $6,000 to take up some 10 by 10 tiles. You rebate a building that size, built in late 50s.
One of the things that, let's do this just so that we can do this orderly. If you'd like to speak, come on up to the podium. We can still engage in the dialogue. But one of the things that you missed before you got here was we didn't do parcel C in terms of the remediation the way we would do parcel C now. The laws have changed significantly. We attempted to completely remediate that property to 100% environment or 100% residential standards without knowing what the site plan of that property was going to be. The laws have changed, the methodology and the efficiency behind environmental remediation has changed. There are ways to subdivide properties, have deed restrictions on properties. You can even do residential subdivision in certain manners on properties that have deed restrictions on them. And I think it's very easy to talk, no disrespect intended, about what you did in your kitchen. This is not a residential home. I mean, this is the future of downtown Naugatuck. This is not something that we've decided overnight, hey, let's go buy a building. It represents what we're going to look like. And I was going to ask you the question, how long have we been looking at it like it is now? What do you expect in 20 years, what do you expect it to look like if the borough is not involved in this transaction? Because my guess is it's going to look exactly the same. And we're going to look at $2 million 20 years from now and say, wow, that was a good investment. Or, oh my goodness, they made a really stupid decision.
End of the conversation. Just let the voters do it. They're the ones going to have to pay for it. residents.
At what level do you remove the elected authority of people who have been voted upon to make the decisions that are quite complex from the process? We are elected to make the decisions. A recommendation has come from the Naugatuck Economic Development Corporation, which was founded on the principles of making smart, long-term, nonpartisan decisions between the business sector, the nonprofit sector, and the public government, who unanimously supported that. At what point do you say as a community, I trust the people in the places to make the decisions? Because quite frankly, I'm doing this as a resident of Naugatuck. I want my children one day to look 20 years from now and say, you know what, at some point, somebody made a choice to say we're not going to do the same things over and over again and wait for the next Uniroyal or wait for the next store X to come to Naugatuck. And you know what? If people told me, you got a choice. Do this now and leave, or take it off the table and stick around for a while. I'll say, give me the box, because I would gladly turn the keys over. This is such an important decision for our kids. It's such an important decision for the future of this borough. It's not simply correlative to what we do in our private lives, in our homes, and etc. This is the fundamental choice of where we want to be as a community in the future. We've tried to wade through a very difficult recession, a process that was very impacted by that recession with Alex Conroy, and now we're sitting here with the lessons that we've learned, one of which very much being the site control matters. And without the site control on properties that have issues like this, it's not going to magically happen.
The history of the borough, though, as a landowner taking parcels of property, I mean, it's been horrible.
You mean the parcel on Meadowbrook Place that we chose not to buy 10 years ago, right next to Cross Street School for a song that we ignored, and they put X number of houses on there and created issues relative to the proximity to the sewage treatment plant? Do you mean the land that's up by Fawn Meadow right now, which the borough was offered to buy, which could have had not only value to the borough, but also reduced the residential development in this town? Because I'm looking at it the opposite way. We've had opportunities to control the destiny of our future, and what we ended up having was more residential houses built on subdivisions because we didn't have the courage to act at the time that it was needed. That's been my history of the borough not owning land as a resident, a lifelong resident of this community.
I see the property that was developed down on Cross Street, and that parcel went for $175,000 because I was looking at it. And look at them homes that were built in there. A private person did that. And they're beautiful homes, and take a look at them. They're $8,000 a year in taxes. They're paying for it. They're paying their freight.
Mr. Herb, you're also putting a stress on our budget as well, because they have children, they require garbage, they require plowing.
What are you going to do for your residents? You know, that's what you got to do. You got to get more
Oh, no,
fire
I
protection.
don't disagree with you, but the cost of what we're collecting in taxes, I would love to see what the financial comparison would be between what they're paying in taxes compared to what the financial burden is.
A higher cost of a house brings less children into it. If you have a $400,000 home, believe me, them people that are residing in that home probably don't have 2 children.
The statistics don't
Probably
support
don't have
that.
2 children.
The statistics don't support that.
Yes.
Dr. Robert Tucson, Middle Street, whatever you have on the table already, you have to go for it. I agree with the buildings, it's priced high, it's priced low, you don't need the buildings, I agree with you, you have to go forward. If the ownership requires us to lease to that, I have a problem with. I don't know yet if we have to take them on as a tenant. If we have to take them on as a tenant, it's paying for the lease right, you can't. You have something on the table, you've done your due diligence, Gary's done it, Eddie's done it, both hands due diligence, and you have to go forward, because you can't wait any longer. I agree with that. The part that I have a problem with is we have to enter into the lease agreement with the data. We need their money that badly to pay back the note, and if we do, is that important? How much you get from the data? There are areas of rate for some property taxes. Are they going to be able to pay the rent?
So, first, the clear answer to your question is we do not have to lease to GDC. It would be our option if we choose to do that or not. Our attorney is actually negotiating with GDC for a couple of reasons. One is that any revenue we bring to that property allows us, that's a good thing, having revenue come, we have an existing tenant, potential tenant there who provides whatever number of jobs and talk about. So we like the concept, it may be harder to get some other tenants going to the already have something there. If the terms of the lease or something that we as a board think makes sense to the town. But the question as to GDC's fiscal issues, the sad truth of this is that because now they're going to take up the big note that they have to the mortgage company and the land, they're going to be more viable than they would be without that. So there is a lot of questions, are they viable right now? We will sort of in this deal, lower their profit, because now they're not going to have to be getting on that huge facility, which we're only using about a quarter.
They sublet to ABW.
They sublet two small subjects to other.
They sublet to ABA, IBW. I have had discussions with them that that's not a long-term arrangement for the borough. Obviously, they're a business in the community, they employ people in the community, so we don't want to remove them immediately, but we have expressed to them that ultimately they would need to find a suitable location. We work with them at the time. Datacom, as Mayor Ron said, does not need to be a tenant there, but quite frankly, even in the original proposal for Renaissance, they were to potentially remain in that building. If they are offsetting the debt service, the rental agreement that we reached for use and occupancy, which is in the document, which again only extends 60 days past closing, is based on $2.35 a square foot, or 80,000 square feet of the first floor. So that payment will help offset the debt service to a certain degree. And does it help to have someone in the building when you're not sure exactly what its long-term future will be? I would say the answer to that is yes.
Yeah, I think ownership is the key. You've got everybody on the same table, and I think it's fine. You have no choice. The way referendums would be nice. Then you have 1,000 more ideas. You have 5 more years to wait. So trust me, I've been there just as long as you've been there, watching the buildings deteriorate. Daddy's been there. We've all been there watching this disease, this cancer overtake our center of our town. There's other parts that are flourishing, there's other parts that need help. This is no-brainer.
And just if I may, for point of information, the NEDC has been approached more than a few times by potential developers as well as potential tenants, additional tenants to the building. So as much as we would like to enjoy GDC's tenancy there are other people that could potentially take other parts of the second floor or other floors within the building. So it's not just sitting there and going to lay fallow. We have opportunities to enjoy other tenants even prior to whatever potential redevelopment is going to happen there. So there's a lot of potential with that building with the property.
I think the first question I have is taxpayers. Is the uncertainty. I listened to that, we're going to buy this property from taxpayer money and all this stuff, but what's the plan? I mean, we have other properties out there right now. We're going to buy this one and it's going to sit there. What are we going to do with it as a taxpayer and talk to people around the house? People are frustrated. I know I am. Because there is so much uncertainty. I mean, this Renaissance thing is bad. We've been waiting for this one, and now we're going to buy this property. What are we going to do for 10 years? And the taxes on the property, what are we taking off of us? What are they going to tax?
The annual property tax is approximately $200,000 a year, which is current. But again, that's based on the 2007 revaluation.
Okay, so if you use that number, and if this property sits for 10 years, you're looking at $2 million. How are we going to make that up?
Well, first of all, the new revaluation notice, which I'm assuming you got as well, is going to change that number. We don't know what the new mill rate is going to be. And quite frankly, even the number that I see on division appraisal right now for that is likely to be challenged. So you're going to see a drop in that real property tax in general. But I'm trying to look at it from a larger perspective is, what do we want the gateway of our community to be? And without the public sector involved in this transaction, for reasons that Attorney O'Connor explained, you have a chance of, best case scenario, someone comes in and puts some kind of use there, and you get some tax revenue, but you have very little control over it, but for your zoning laws. Two, it sits there for the next generation without any activity on it. So yeah, maybe somebody's paying taxes on it, but I'm certain they're going and challenging the assessment on it, which is going to reduce it even more.
I agree with you. I think the level of government, I think she actually has this agreement, that's a different issue. I definitely agree that something has to get done with the property, and I think that this is a good start, but it seems like it's rushed. The property is going into foreclosure. Why not enforce or demand? I heard from you. If that's or if it's not, it was said to me. What's the rush without another uncertain property? Are we going with a Renaissance plan? Are we, is there an idea at least for the property you can give to us to say, you know what, this is what we plan on, this is how we're going to sell it, this is how we're going to get, because obviously an investor can get investments, so big to invest in this. So obviously, how are we going to do it if there's not something we can give to somebody?
I think part of the Renaissance
And Renaissance
is done. It's completely done. We've been able to separate from that and minimize
good
it.
plan.
Yeah.
So maybe we can incorporate.
Well, it was, but the major component of that was ownership of GDC. You know, that's a mammoth piece of property. And I agree with you, we own other pieces of property, but when you look at the size of the acreage, it's not extremely conducive to something of the scale that we would require in order to create this draw that Mr. Hurd talks about. If there's going to be a draw, there has to be a draw downtown. And I cannot tell you how many times I've had residents come to me. I just got a phone call this week. Why are we doing X, Y, Z with Peter Paul? Why? Because we don't own it. It's privately, the mayor should come out before. It's privately owned. With ownership of this property, we can now, honor these requests by developers to come in and present to us. One of the things we're talking about with this lease to purchase is the flexibility to not be tied in for 10 years. Why? Because our goal is, we've all sat around, and this isn't, I know this may appear to you to have been very quick. This has been going on for a long, long time, a lot of executive sessions. Let me just finish this chain of thought, or I'll lose it. But the flexibility is a critical component, because this board's intent is to see us move this piece of property forward. I've been in town for 20 plus years and looked at this vacant lot, and it gets worse and worse and worse, and GDC, there, and our hope and our vision is to move this forward and to start to have NEDC entertain these developers to come in, to hear what their plans are. And once we have a better idea of what that development is, we also then, as we've spoken about before, as far as remediation by Attorney O'Connor, we'll also have a better idea of what our remediation costs will be.
What's the plan? What are you going to buy this thing?
That is right.
If you buy the property, if you're a business owner, you buy the property with an idea that, this is what we want. You have to be flexible in how it's going to happen.
I think your analogy is right on point, except that if you're a business owner, you're looking for the best location and where the most profit for the location is, and you go there. We're not a business. We are the borough, and our downtown is not going to go somewhere. It's going to be there.
How many studies have we done on this property, right? Have we done studies on this property?
Yeah.
How this Conway probably is on
Let me,
So we probably have studies on it, where why don't we use those studies to say this is...
because at the end of the day, what's going to happen there is going to involve the private sector. And I'm a big believer that the private sector will develop. They're the only people who create jobs, and the only people who generate tax revenue outside of the residential area. The private sector will dictate what goes there. The problem now is the market is bastardized by the fact that you've got environmental issues on the property, and if you do not have the public sector's involvement, no private business will invest in the cleanup of that site. It does, the numbers don't work. So without the borough's involvement and the borough's commitment to gain access to state and federal brownfield dollars, you're not going to see that property redeveloped. And if you do, it's going to be at a very low level that is not consistent with what you want your downtown to look like.
The country is determined whether we want to use studies in town right now. So what's the guarantee that we're actually...
There is no guarantee, but the market is at its lowest point in terms of the ability for us to acquire. Now,
It's a risk.
you're right.
It's a risk.
Because here's what we would be doing right now.
I'm going to give somebody else.
No, it's a good conversation. Please. It's a good conversation. Here's what we'd be doing right now if we weren't sitting at this table looking to purchase this property. Alex Conrad is gone. Renaissance Place is over. We own this property, which is very much dependent on what the state wants to do with this Metro North line, which they've studied it to death, and there's not the dollars that they're willing to invest to do the recommendations in the study. The major piece of property that we own is parcel C. It's just under 2.5 acres worth of land. Now, back in 2002, remember, I think your son, Mr. Herb, was on the committee. We issued an RFP for that property. There were 4 different proposals that were submitted. One was for, the top 2 were for a movie theater, the other was for a residential assisted living facility. The highest value offer on purchase price at that time was a Walgreens, and they offered $1 million for that site. And the borough, at the time, different board, different leadership, determined that that was not the best use or the best value that we could have in our downtown. We had another box supermarket at the other end of the community. We had various local independently owned pharmacies there. If we wanted to just make the buck then, and quite frankly, if we wanted to do that now, that option's available to us. When we think of downtowns today, there's not factories in downtowns. They're centered on smart growth where there's a mix of residential, retail, entertainment. When you have access to transportation networks, it increases it. So if we weren't sitting here today, we'd be issuing an RFP for parcel C and this property. The problem is, you're probably likely to get exactly what you got in the past. 10 years ago, even with the recession included. The issue is, we can issue an RFP for parcel C, this property, and the Datacom properties, and the first thing that any investor is going to look at is, well, who owns that property over there, the 10-acre one? Oh, we don't own that. And you're not going to get the type of interest if you don't have site control of the properties. So if we're not going to do this, the next step is to say, we're going to go back to where we were prior to Alice Conway and say, what do we want on parcel C? And maybe we get a medical facility standalone. Maybe we get a big box, smaller big box. But that's not what I want for our downtown. That's not what I want people to come in and see when they come to the borough of Naugatuck. I'd like to see a smart growth downtown that's connected in some way with a mix of
What do you, when you see this, what do you see there? I mean, what kind of, we're gonna knock building down?
Nobody knows, sir. Nobody knows.
Well, I mean,
Nobody can give a guarantee in business what is going to happen because this is time.
Sir, you can come back up if you like. We can't have a yelling match.
No, because I'm saying it's taking too much time. I don't want to talk.
Oh, okay, then
we'll let you make out.
There's no time limit tonight. You're going to get your opportunity.
No, I don't. Let's make a point.
That's good.
I'm sorry. As the mayor said, there's no current date, isn't it? That what is going to happen in this, what is going ask Barack Obama. You know, he's the president of the United States. Does he know what is going to happen tomorrow? Nobody knows. We don't have the crystal ball here to predict what is going to happen. Well, we are adults here, okay? We are educated, we are adults, and we have to speak the truth and to say honestly and leave the politics, and I don't care about politics, you know, Mr. Mayor. I respect you, you are one of the best mayors in Africa, okay? But I have to say something, you know, that we cannot guarantee me, if you borrow the money and you raise the taxes, that your beautiful Granita, I love you 100%. I'm with you. I want to see them become beautiful. I want to see marriage to be nice. Everybody wants that. We live here. But there's no guarantee that it's going your plan to succeed because in this economic era, I follow economics day and night worldwide. I watch European news, I watch the American news, I am very, very, very informed about economics. There is no guarantee either is American economy is going where it's going or not. The billionaires, I was reading the news next, the financial side, the billionaires, they grab all the major stocks of all the motion, how to say, from they saw billions of dollars in American companies, in American companies. Go to the United States financial sector. Billionaires, they saw the other day stocks of all the major U.S. companies. This is an alarming kind of thing that in this period, that's why before I said that investment right now, I'm talking about time. So what I'm saying to you, you have to be very cautious. Play with people's money that don't have too much right now in order to make investment with interest. Okay? To achieve something that you're not sure is a matter if it's going to succeed and when. Can't you do anything? So, do you get me? I like your plan, I like your idea, I'm with you 100%. But it's a risky kind of business right now in this economy to go ahead with some extra things right now that probably you can sit back a little and say, okay, it's there. We live with that the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Let's wait a little and see how the economy will do down the road. And let's take from there. There's no any rush to take of this. There's no any rush. Right, in this, you know, you get and to extend ourselves and take the risk behind this. That's the only thing. You define it. I'm not saying I'm with you. I'm saying I can work voluntarily to define it work. You know, to make it. So, investing people's money is right now, I think, with all respect, it's a really 50-50 very easy.
Mayor, I have something. I would say very shortly, if you're looking for a guarantee, this board's not going to give you one. The NEDC is not going to give you one. None of the people that have been consulting us are going to give you a guarantee. If you're looking what the probability is, 15, 20 years from now that you speak about, if there's no action taken that involves the public sector on a parcel like this, you're probably going to be looking at the same thing, or worse.